Tato, ko mau te monga, ko te moana toi, te moana. Ko manaki, tanga Aotearoa taku mahi, ko polio taku ingoa. Nau mai, haere mai. Welcome everybody, Happy New Year and welcome to today's Tourism New Zealand Australia Restart webinar. This is where you're, of course, going to find out about our restart plans for the Australian market and, of course, give you some insights into how we're prepared, how your business can take effect and attract and welcome our Aussie neighbours once we're all geared up and ready for them. As I said in my intro, my name's Paul Yeo. I'm Tourism New Zealand's Industry Relations Manager. Based, as you can see behind me, in the Bay of Plenty at the moment, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour. So, of course, today you're going to hear from two key speakers from Tourism New Zealand, and most importantly, we give you the opportunity to ask some questions towards the end as well. First up will be René Monchy, our Interim Chief Executive from Tourism New Zealand, in the hot seat from this week with the departure of Stephen England Hall, and of course Andrew Waddel, Wads, our GM Australia, based in Sydney. So each of the speakers will talk for around about 45 minutes or so. Then there'll be the opportunity for you to ask questions. You'll have all done enough of these webinars over time. It's maybe the first for the new year. You know how to use the system, the Q&A button down the bottom, and then we'll take all of those questions, or as many of them as we can fit in during the hour session. So almost, or in fact, over 600 people have registered for this. Fabulous turnout. So we're really looking forward to hearing probably the first webinar of the year. So a big welcome to the TNZ team, and René, welcome. Leave it to you to kick things off.
Kia ora. Thanks, Paul. I hope you can all hear me all okay.
Perfect.
So I'll kick off. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko rangatoto te maunga, ko haraki te moana, no tamaki makaura aho, ko manaki Aotearoa, manakitangi Aotearoa taku mahi, ko de Monchy te whānau, ko René taku ingoa. Thank you so much for joining us. As Paul said, Happy New Year. I'm sure we're all pleased to see the back of 2020, and now we kind of lean into 2021. So look, it's great to have you here. It's great to have such a high number of registrations, over 600, which shows that there's clearly a massive interest into the Australian market and its importance to New Zealand. And look, we are, as Tourism New Zealand, looking forward to news on the Trans-Tasman bubble as much as you are. So we were delighted to hear the news pre-Christmas of both governments planning for that Trans-Tasman travel zone early in 2021. It is clear, and there's no doubting the importance of the Australian visitors to New Zealand's tourism sector, and therefore its importance to our overall economy. If you look at historical levels, Australia was about 30% of the value of all international visitors, so far and away the largest market in value to New Zealand and to the sector. Well, look, we also know that the environment we operate in is more fluid than ever, and there's just as many unknowns in 2021 as there are in 2020. Unfortunately, the roller coaster continues. But look, Andrew is going to take you through the planned activity for Australia. But before we get into that, I wanted to just touch on the role of Tourism New Zealand has in all of this, just to be clear on where we play and what we do. Unfortunately, we have no insider knowledge right now, and we know as much as you do around the borders. Tourism New Zealand does not have a decision-making role when it comes to borders, but our job is really clear: to be ready and make sure that we're using our data and insights to inform the decision makers. So we're doing a lot of work in researching and gathering insights, both with international visitors, in this case Australians, as well as with New Zealanders, and sharing that insight with government and with the decision makers around the borders. But the key thing for us is also being ready, and that's really clear, and Andrew's going to take you through the plan that he and his team in Australia have developed for the majority of this webinar but it's safe to say that when Australians are ready to visit, we will be ready to promote visitation to New Zealand. So I might just click onto the next slide, Andrew. This is really a summary of the latest information that we have, and many of you will have seen this pre-Christmas and during the summer break. It's really referencing a zone, a travel zone beginning in early 2021. And as we all know, this is an ever-changing context that we operate in, right? We saw the flare-ups of COVID-19 pre-Christmas, and therefore some further restrictions within Australia and shutdowns. So we don't know whether that Trans-Tasman travel zone is going to be next week, next month, or the following one. But we continue to work to that being in early 2021. We're expecting and hopeful of further announcements coming early next month, if not before. And we do know that both New Zealand and Australia have taken clearly their health response to COVID-19 very seriously. A lot of work is going into health and border requirements for implementation of the zone and making sure that it's safe for people to travel when they can. So when we do hear the news of the Trans-Tasman travel zone, what's the plan? That's the key focus for our discussion today, and how you can leverage the work we're doing and how you can be part of the work that we're doing in terms of us promoting travel to New Zealand. And Australia, the team in Australia led by Andrew Waddel, or Wads, who many of you I'm sure will know, have done a great job at building a very flexible plan. This plan was ready to go. If you remember way back when, there was some talk of Australia opening up last winter, and then possibly in October, and then possibly pre-Christmas. We have been adjusting this flexible plan to be ready to go when the announcement is made. So look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Wads. He's going to take you through the guts of that plan, and then I'll come back at the end with a bit of a summary, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So Wads, over to you.
Thanks, René. Kia ora te whānau, ko Ruapehu te moanga no Raumati aho, ko Waddel taku whānau. Ko Anaru taku ingoa, ko Manakitanga e te aroa takamahi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for joining this webinar from Tourism New Zealand, and specifically connecting with the Australian team based in Sydney. I'm calling from Bondi, but I do have a slice of New Zealand behind me with Kapiti Island and Raumati, which is sort of my where my mother lives, and probably spiritual home, I would say. So I'm very close to New Zealand and looking forward, like many New Zealanders and Australians, to get back in due course. As René's talked about, we're very much focused on being ready when it will be announced and have a plan to go to market as that comes to life. Just a couple of things to bring to light from an Australian perspective. It has been a turbulent few weeks with infection rates increasing, or had been increasing. There were a number of hotspots both at a suburb and state level, and changeable federal and state government action as a result of that. But as of last week, I think Thursday the 14th, they had recorded 0 community transmissions, which is an important milestone in the journey to 28 days of 0 community transmissions in Australia. There were a number of subsequent cases on Sunday in New South Wales, but the cases are routinely in single digits, and over the last 24 hours, no states have recorded locally acquired COVID cases. You would have heard of some cases, mostly around the Australian Open. There's actually 89 overseas acquired cases in hotel quarantine in the last 7 days. So the management of COVID and the cases in Australia is significantly improved, and the conditions are becoming more favourable. Part of the difference that you'll see from Australia to New Zealand will be the approach to suppression or elimination. The Australians' official policy is aggressive suppression, but in truth, all states bar New South Wales are seeking elimination. It does create some friction between the state and federal governments, but increasingly as they go through different scenarios, it's strengthening the case for long term, which then means that the case to open to New Zealand will only strengthen. So as of today, the hotspots have been declassified. I think Brisbane and greater area of Brisbane will be open to travel by Friday this week. So really the situation is improving, but I think the learnings as it improves is significant, particularly as the New Zealand and Australian governments look to how they'll open and the scenarios they'll have to plan to. So our job is to be ready at a moment's notice, and part of the communication today will prepare you and share that information and prepare you to benefit from that preparation. So we've got a very clear job to be done, and we've been consistent in our communication to do this, and I'm really pleased with the results to date. Firstly, we continue to keep New Zealand top of mind, to keep the brand salient, top of mind, and win Australian consumers. So we call that the job to be done now, and that's prime. It was intended to be a month or two, and it's stretched out of 6 months, and we've continued to bring great piece of activity through. We're agile for when circumstances allow, and we'll continue to be optimistically realistic, recognising that our footprint to make those changes is relatively flexible. We then want to ignite and then scale up, and those are both really important. Ignite Trans-Tasman travel, ensure there's a robust travel sector and partnership in place to be able to realise that pent-up demand, and most importantly, be able to scale up sustainable visitor and value, make it sticky, make the capacity stick, make the airline routes connect with gateways into Australia and for that to stick, and hold strong for the longer term as new competitors and new countries come online. So regarding priming, we've primed our audience through a significant earned campaign, which has been challenging because we haven't had IMP media to set foot on Australia in New Zealand for some time. That we've had a fantastic result in H1, maximising the value and earned coverage. And our content has generated and reached over 92 million. In Australia, we've had national brand storytelling, exploiting a newsroom to its fullest capacity, and that really puts us in good stead to go forward, as this is a hot topic across Australia. We've primed our audience through our campaign activity. You'll remember the very innovative and excellent Play NZ launching into messages, and had a multi-campaign activity across different demographics and different traveller mindsets, which has been fantastic. And messages is significant because it was a brand New Zealand story, and we really have continued to team up with New Zealand Inc. Across NZTE and New Zealand Story to have a coordinated story that is efficient, effective, and generates impact in market. So really punching above our weight, which has been fantastic. From a trade perspective, had a huge amount of activity going on, keeping the hearts and minds of our global travel agents, both in lending a compassionate and empathetic ear to providing tools that they need to manage with their database and loyal partners, as well as being able to generate and convert that demand when it comes to light as borders open. So we've had a messages from New Zealand, which is aligned to our consumer campaign and continues to roll out till April 2021. And we continue to engage through all social channels and support the travel and trade industry in Australia specifically, and then linking into New Zealand as well. And from a BE perspective as well, we've had to manage considerable business shifts in 2020. The 2021 conferences have shifted out to 2022. We've got, and had a very focused and developed a very focused and robust pipeline to convert business in the future. We've got dedicated support and resource with Sam and Helen in Australia to be that front line to develop relationships and ensure and continue those relationships and strengthen them to convert in the future. There are opportunities to take part in trade shows. There's one up in AIM in March and meetings in June, and they've both got virtual and hopefully in-person opportunities as well. So continuing to prime that audience and that business traveller for the future. So what does all that mean? Australians are primed and ready to travel to New Zealand. 95% of Australians or active considerers rate New Zealand's health response to COVID positively. And interestingly, this improves perception of New Zealand as a holiday destination for over 2/3, which is fantastic. So improve the brand strength effectively and desirability to travel. At 77%, holiday is the most common reason for first overseas trip. So sorry, mum and dad, it's not to go and see friends and family, it is to go on holiday. And it's almost double the need to visit family. If you quantify the pent-up demand of those active considerers that say they want to travel to New Zealand in the first 6 months of restrictions being lifted, it equates to about 2.3 million Australians who will travel. To give you an idea of that scale and size, 1.5 million visitors across to Australians to New Zealand in that period pre-COVID, 600,000 holidays, 600,000 visiting friends and family, and then business, education making up the rest. So, significant pent-up demand. They want to travel for fun and enjoy, rest and relax, escape the routine and learn and explore. And over 2/3 want to travel up to that 2-week period, and 20% for longer. So some really good length of stay figures coming through as well. Importantly, 99% support Trans-Tasman Travel Zone, and the government concerns are the same as the consumer concerns, which is how do you manage a very volatile situation? How do you manage outbreaks in either country, and the logistical implications on holiday and what that means? And there will be, we've heard from government, they want full transparency on how to approach the Trans-Tasman Travel Zone, so all travellers are aware of their commitments and their requirements should they be travelling between 2 countries quarantine-free. So our next job to be done is to ignite AU travel to New Zealand, capitalise on the high levels of appeal and preference, drive that urgency to take that New Zealand holiday by inspiring Australians to book and travel now. Very much answer the call of New Zealand. You would have heard it previously pre-COVID about this apathy, and we'll go to New Zealand in the future and later in life. Now it's like go now, travel now, make it happen now. So a very strong and direct call to action, which is fantastic. We've got a really exciting campaign which we're working on in that. Why is that important to activate? You might say, well, we'll be the only international market. It's going to be and is already extremely competitive. We've got some significant competition up with Tourism Australia and all the individual states. Remember, Destination New South Wales has their budget is bigger than Tourism New Zealand in total. So we're up against significant budgets and economic packages that support that. And interestingly, Tasmania has popped up in New Zealand with front of the Herald and RAP and a $1.5 million spend in New Zealand at the moment, appealing to New Zealanders to travel. So it's really important that we fight the good fight and get Australians in New Zealand and experiencing all that's to offer. How do we show up? How we show up in Australia is critical. We do need to cut through to generate impact. We do that through the idea of jolting apathy, and really cutting through to get our messages through to Australians to travel now. We do need to be better than the competitors, be bold and do that together as one, collectively, so that we're efficient and effective, and we must generate impact. And we've been able to show the benefit of doing that across campaigns, whether at New Australia Land in the past, Plan Z, Good Morning World and so forth, and we're really excited about the next phase for what that looks like from Ignite. So I've just got a couple more slides on really what our roadmap is to market, and that's very much just looking at what is the timeline from an announcement through to that first flight. So we've got 3 phases. The first is a sort of pre any announcement and the work that we continue to do, which is under Prime, and we continue to ramp up that and making sure we're across all news streams and all channels to be able to ensure that we're getting very much top of mind messaging through to those audiences. At Ignite, there'll be a border announcement in week 1 effectively, and we've got a plan for 1 + 8 weeks and then 8 + 16 weeks. So there will be a frenzy and excitement around that Trans-Tasman announcement. We're working with New Zealand government and the Australian government around how that announcement will come to life. From a government level, there'll be a coordination, and then also we're working with Tourism Australia for bringing that message through and that collective benefit of a Trans-Tasman Travel Zone. We're working with our existing partners in airline and trade to ensure that there's active conversion opportunities from that moment, and there's a lot of pent-up demand that will be immediately to call into first to fly. So we'll coordinate that activity and support through financial where we need to, but ultimately ensuring that there's clear air and time in the sun to be able to convert that pent-up demand. It's important that once that's announced, we'll have a fame moment, and we're going to bring that to life through New Zealand and Australia press, but also potentially from a global perspective. So the benefit of Australia and New Zealand opening and travel in a travel zone shouldn't be underestimated, and its contribution to the brand image of Australia and New Zealand. Shows us innovative, progressive, ingenious, and really world-leading in the sense of management of COVID. So it won't just stand out from an opportunity point of view for both New Zealand and Australian public, but it'll be picked up globally, which, as we know, in the future to convert long-haul travel is going to be really important. So that fame moment will hopefully carry beyond Australian and New Zealand shores, talking about Trans-Tasman Travel Zone, sibling rivalry meets solidarity, as we call it. I heard the other day that so ultimately it's bringing the two countries together to create banter and excitement around this new opportunity. So we'll continue to have partner activity for the first 4 to 8 weeks. Our Ignite campaign will be ready from March onwards, and we are able to adjust that and push that into future scenarios should we need to. And that's our next significant campaign for Australia. And that's very much answering the call. We'll then bring in joint venture activity as well, which will be more branded Tourism New Zealand or 100% pure New Zealand to be able to bring it through as well. Then we move into scale up, which is T9 to 16 weeks. Our Ignite campaign has the strength to carry us over 6 to 12 weeks, and we'll provide a platform for us to take that into FY22 as well. Depending on the timing of the Trans-Tasman Travel Zone, we have ski, so this is how we winter campaign, and we have the creative execution of that to be able to generate desirability about destination ski New Zealand. So the timing of the Trans-Tasman Travel Zone is critical for that, in that are we able to drive winter visitation from opening of ski season, July, August, September, and we're talking with the ski industry about where and how to supplement and build Australian visitation to support that domestic upswing as well. So we've got a campaign ready to go. We'll also look to be bringing in some sort of the moment as live activations and information and opportunities to be able to show what skiing in New Zealand would be like with the borders opening. Always on search is obviously a significant brand and demand opportunity to be able to convert that pent-up demand, and then we'll have significant joint venture and partnership activity across all our major partners, so airlines, Qantas, Air New Zealand, Virgin should be flying, and then Jetstar, and then obviously Hello World Flight Centre, and then be able to bring it through the various other trade partners as well. We're launching a trade hub in February, which will provide partner assets or brand and creative assets for our travel and trade and travel agents to be able to use through all their networks. And that's all about providing them the easy tools to easily access their law database and convert that into immediate travel. So sort of robust plan from T-4 to T16 weeks. We're able to stretch that out obviously into 2021 and into 2022. Over the course of the year, we'll share the creative update on that and how that comes to life through for both for operators, RTOs, and for partners. So key takeout, Australia is primed and ready to go, and Tourism New Zealand working with our partners based in Australia, airports, airlines and trade partners, and then also our New Zealand whānau across RTOs and operators, really looking to convert that pent-up demand. So there's up to 22.3 million Australians primed and ready to travel. If we can convert a good percentage of that, that'll definitely generate a good return of international tourism. Remembering there's a $12.9 billion gap with the loss of international tourism. Australia will supplement that and close some of that gap up to $3 billion in the first 12 months, which would be significant. And ultimately, so how do we do that? We're going to ignite travel and convert that demand from the moment of announcement ongoing, recognising we've got a primed audience eager to travel, and then working to ensure we're scaling up the right visitor mix, the right value mix that travels with spirit and heart, and cares for New Zealand through Te Aki Promise, and ensuring that that visitor mix is sustainable over the long term, particularly as other countries come online to travel. So it's really maximising that value, that contribution of Australian visitor as we continue into 2021 and into 2022. So very much prime, ignite and scale up, and we'll continue to work with you to bring that to life through our creative execution and market across paid, earned and trade. So thanks for your time today. I'll pass back to René, and then we'll have a good volume of time to handle any questions.
Kia ora, Wads. Thank you very much. And look, thanks to you and the team for all the work you've been doing on it. As I said at the start, you know, our key task as Tourism New Zealand is to make sure that we're ready. We're ready to go. We're ready to go with content. We're ready to excite Australians about being able to travel back to New Zealand. And that's been very much the focus, and we'll continue to do that and continue to be flexible at how and when we roll that out. But one thing we are super clear on is the massive importance of Australia and what a big opportunity this is for us as an industry. You know, 30% of historical value coming from Australians, getting our cousins from across the ditch back in to enjoy all the great things in New Zealand would be a, you know, significant shift in 2021. I've just got one slide before we open up for Q&A, and it's really just a reminder slide. It's pretty simple, but really important. Just what can you do as operators to be connected into all of this? And there's a few things you can definitely do. You've heard this a lot, but there's no danger in repeating it, I think. Make sure you're listing on newzealand.com. It's massively important. We're getting, you know, we're still getting a lot of visitation to newzealand.com and also domestically now, obviously. But make sure that your offers, your deals are all up to date, and make sure that it's continually up to date on newzealand.com. And look, if you're not familiar with the Tourism Business Database, you don't know quite how to get the listings and how to do that, now's the time. Just get in touch with us, Stephen Griffiths, who many of you will know. He's our lead in our business, and he'll help you with your business listing. And he really is there to help, to make sure that you've got everything uploaded and up to date and accurate. And as a reminder, it's all absolutely free. It's also now a good time to revisit your own website, social media channels, and anywhere else your business is featured, to make sure that it's all up to date for impending, hopefully soon, Australian visitation. And look, just looping back to COVID-19, I think some travellers are going to want to know what health and safety measures you have in place. This is going to be increasingly important. This is going to be the new normal we expect from travellers. And we're currently working on this as well through Colmark on what this might look like for industry. So more information to come in terms of how you can really be proactive at being able to answer those questions for visitors as they're thinking about coming. And lastly, look, it's really to remind our neighbours across the ditch, we're here, we're ready, and we're keen to welcome them back when the time's right. Whether these are your trade or BE or incentive contacts, we've learned how important connection is over the last year. So we're really looking forward to welcoming our friends back. And look, just before we open up, I'm going to hand back to Paul, but just before we do that and open up the floor to questions, I just wanted to again thank you all for joining us. Hopefully the last month here in New Zealand has been a busy one for many of you, certainly anecdotally, and we're starting to get some of the data back. And if I look at the search volume going into newzealand.com was up substantially through the months of December and into January. So hopefully your operations and your businesses have had some good times over the last few weeks over the summer. We know that we're operating in a massively challenging environment and uncertainty continues. But I thank you for continuing to put your best foot forward, welcoming New Zealanders, and hopefully soon we're going to get to show the same manaakitanga to our neighbours across the ditch in Australia. Paul, I'll hand back to you, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Fabulous. Thanks, René. Thanks, Wads, for that lead-in presentation. And indeed, it is now question time. Just a reminder to everybody, just hit the Q&A button down below and enter your questions there. And for a few who've already asked, yes, this is being recorded, and we hope to have a full video copy of this on Tourism New Zealand's corporate website by Friday at the latest. So what I will do is I'll read out each of the questions, and all of you will see visibility of those in the text box. And apologies if I do truncate a few of them. We want to squeeze in as many as we can. So a bit of paraphrasing going on. First one, is there more detailed demographic data on the primed and the ready to travel? Is it more high-end travel, high disposable income, ski, or others?
Oh, I'm off mute. Yeah, I can answer that. Yes, we do have some more demographic data. It's the response around that pent-up demand is built around our ACs. So we've got 18 to 74 full demographic, but then we've also got it as non-ACs as well. So we've got comparison about their desirability to travel. I don't have the exact figures on me, but the work we've been doing has been focused more on 24 to 39 as one group, and then 40 to 54 as the second core group. So that would be what we would consider as first to travel. I'd have to come back to you on the specific stuff around the value that they're prepared to spend in that sense. But we do have some information that we can share after this, which gives you a full breakdown.
Thanks, Andrew. There's been some coverage in New Zealand that any flights arriving into New Zealand as part of the bubble would only be via Auckland, and not necessarily Christchurch, Queenstown, or Wellington. Any thoughts on that? Yeah,
that we'll probably get. My understanding is that's not the case. That it's a country-to-country scenario, similar to what Australia wouldn't be broken down by state. So they would need to have a scenario that is able to work across all gateway markets or gateways. My understanding is one of the reasons why there's probably more conversation around what's coming out of Auckland is the management of those people through Auckland, both in quarantine and out of quarantine, given that that's the volume of where most go through. But all the discussions we've had with airlines and airports is opening the Trans-Tasman travels and them to be able to access individual gateways into New Zealand. René, I don't know if you've got.
Yeah, same here, Wads. I think in the conversations we've been having with the likes of Air New Zealand and with the airports as well is the same thing. I think it's very much what you may see is that you may see some new routes opening up that are that traditionally haven't been there. But certainly I will double check, but I haven't heard any of that conversation about flights only coming into Auckland. I think you'll see the traditional ports across the Tasman open up, and possibly some new routes as well.
Yeah, and that's definitely evident in the sense of potential new ports in Australia that might open up a new catchment areas into New Zealand, which is interesting from a reach perspective and how we would then activate and convert that demand.
Do we have any ideas or thoughts on running Tourism New Zealand roadshows for RTOs, operators, once the two-way bubble is announced, so that we can reconnect with our Aussie agents and update them on product?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the key one is to keep us updated on where things are at, and we use our existing channels through the Trade Hub, our Facebook group, and ensure that we're very much top of mind. We would be looking to bring through, we haven't planned out a specific roadshow as far as traditional sense in getting on planes and traveling around the country. First and foremost, as far as speed to market, would be accessing virtual opportunities to be able to create that connection. And so, yeah, we can update on the timing of those relative to that Trans-Tasman travel zone, and it does depend on that announcement, which then gives that emphasis to be able to go through. What we would say is if and when that is announced, please do contact us first and foremost to be able to talk about when and how you want to travel to Australia. If that's the case, how you're going to connect, and we'll do our best to coordinate to ensure you get maximum cut through and impact. It actually probably comes on to the next point question there from Sarah regarding how RTOs will operate and market and compete each other. particularly around media and targeting. It applies within both operators, applies in the sense of how to get biggest cut through. We want to work together and coordinate activity and get maximum cut through. Specifically on media and targeting, we want to provide access to still to be confirmed, but media agency to be able to coordinate media spend and know what we're doing, buy into the activity so it's got greater reach and cut through, but recognizing there might be individual activity by RTO and ultimately we ensure that that's coordinated. We also want to make sure we consider that it's not a all in at all at once. While I've given you an 8+1+8 and 8+16, it's a long road we've got to play, and there will be a frenzy. So you have to it's important we don't all clamber to be in market all at once. That's mapped out for greatest benefit over the long term. And that's why sustainable visitor and value is going to be critical. So talk to us, get in touch. Myself, Declan and the marketing team, Sandra and trade, LB from a PR, Lauren from PR perspective, we'll access our agencies. Remember, we're in market, talking with all the contacts here, media landscape, etc. And we want to provide that frontline support for if and when you will operate in market. That's either in media perspective, turning up with creative, or turning up on one of the first flights. Our house is your house. Come and say hello.
Absolutely. And still on that regional destination level, the question here around where does TNZ predict visitors from Australia will visit regionally while in New Zealand, and how does the search and engagement activity you've been talking about support this? And are the airlines sharing proposed capacity into the New Zealand-based international hubs?
Yeah, so I'll probably start on the last part of that question, which is around the airline capacity. That's still being worked through with the airports. We do know that they are confirming sort of route schedules and have a view on that. That'll largely dictate the capacity into New Zealand. Their dispersal regionally, it's going to be really hard to anticipate and forecast and anticipate, particularly because we're unsure of the blend of visiting friends and family, business and holiday. So we to map into the second part of the question was a search show. We'll have to provide some information around what that looks like. Ultimately, we want to map demand to supply and ensure that that is tailor fit, or that's custom fit to that domestic traveller as well. So it's really important that we work in collaboration with the domestic team and continue to do with Tourism New Zealand, but also with the RTOs. So we'll come back to you on what that looks like once we know some more information.
Andrew, we've seen Australian state borders open and close. What's the pulse of Australian travellers and their appetite to travel trans-Tasman, as opposed to the risk of the booking and then potentially seeing a shutdown? Have we factored that in? Yeah,
it's one of the most significant concerns in around that trans-Tasman travel zone. We have seen some examples of state borders closing very quickly, and Australian citizens being caught out and stuck at state borders. We understand there'll be the New Zealand government and Australian government will want greater visibility and transparency on those scenarios, and that's being worked on at the moment. What does that mean? It means there's more public information if a border closes, what the implications for that traveller is. That may dilute the desirability or that ultimate those. Not desirability, that may dilute the number of people that are prepared to travel, but it'll give greater confidence and trust in that travel experience. So that's still got to be worked through, and we understand that that'll be updated and published publicly. So anyone traveling will know if a border closes based on a certain scenario, what their obligations as that traveller will be.
And following on to those questions that you both talked about, new potential air routes, a couple of interesting ones posed here, Maroochydore in Queensland to Queenstown, Adelaide to Christchurch, Tasmania to Rotorua. I guess supply demand will be really interesting to see what might pop up.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about from an airline point of view, there's a few planes that are open to travel, and the opportunity cost of putting them in plane is either parked or not. So it'd be interesting to see how that scenario plays out. We don't have any insight of particularly new routes. That is very much from an airline and commercial sensitivity with airports. But if there are suggestions, then it should be discussed with the local gateways and what that could look like. Remembering that they want ultimately commercial, they want good margin and commercial return, given that their yields have been pretty challenged in the last. Well, they haven't had any yield for the last year, so that's what they'll be looking to rebuild.
Yeah, I think that's certainly to build on that, Paul. I think the conversations that we've been having here, and I'm sure that's how Air New Zealand's looking at the world as well, is coming out of the disastrous year that was 2020, they will look at opportunities where they exist, and some will be shorter term and some will be longer term. So I think our role will be trying to get an understanding and a view of that as quickly as possible, and seeing what the opportunity is for promoting New Zealand as a consequence of that.
Yes, the obvious thing that comes out of that is, are we likely to see higher trans-Tasman airfares than what we saw before, and will that be a off-putting factor?
Yeah, it's a competitive trans-Tasman as a healthy trans-Tasman travel. So, Jetstar, Qantas, and Air New Zealand are all in the game, and Virgin, continue to rebuild, and their activity in Australia has been very aggressive in the sense of, re-establishing themselves after a period of challenge. So, if you put those four in the mix, it's very likely there'll be a good volume of capacity, a good capacity, and there'll be suitable airfares to be able to convert that into travel.
And clearly Emirates won't be in the mix this time.
Well, as in Emirates and from New Zealand, Australia to New Zealand?
Yeah,
no, there's they're working through some challenges out of for the Australian government at the moment, but yeah, so that's a factor that will be taken into account, but it'll be picked up by the other airlines as far as capacity.
Sure. One for you, René, here, which is off the Australian topic, but onto Qualmark, and a questioning on when can we get, for an operator's point of view, an indication on costs post September. Of course, everybody's happy that it's FOC. Free for Qualmark at the moment, but will that continue, and when will they know if it doesn't continue?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The team have worked at the moment, as you're aware. Qualmark's been free of charge, and we've committed to that until September of this year, whilst rolling out the business support programs. And as I mentioned earlier, now we're working as well on the kind of getting ready for the traveling in a COVID world, and what that means for operators and what those consumer insights are for that. We're working at that at the moment. I don't have an exact timeline, but we are working on that at the moment. But we would certainly use the fees pre-COVID as the baseline to look at. So we will come back to the operators soon in terms of what that looks like from a timing perspective, and then also assess it from a fees perspective.
Great news. Flexible cancellation policies, will that be important? I guess this is both from an airline perspective and land content. How will that factor in the minds of Australian consumers?
Yeah, so it's real and needed, and all from what we can tell across all trade partners, they do have that in place already, both from a flexible in time and flexible in cancellation. I just wanted to bring up an example. We're working with a trade partner at the moment, and we've got some activity in market in January, 4 flights to New Zealand. They've also got flights to, they've got packages to New Zealand and Japan, and they've been able to convert demand even before that Trans-Tasman travel zone has been announced from a timing perspective. So those are long-term bookings. They're towards the end of the year. They tend to be package-based, so it includes I think camper van, I think there's cruise in there as well, and that just gives you an example of consumers' confidence and comfort to book based on the opportunity and price, but also on the cancellation and flexible booking. So that's with a major trade partner, and all of them. It's I think they've got a tagline like "You've got nothing to lose," and that's exactly. So it's building that confidence to book. I think that the hard one is the multiple. The implications of that is rebooking and rebooking that gets a little bit wary for both traveller as well as travel agent. So, but yes, it is important.
If I add, just to add to that, if you look at our consumer research that we continue doing around the world, you can see that health and safety has obviously become really high on the list in terms of people's expectations. But as part of that is also flexibility. I think this will just be the new normal. Levels of flexibility in all bookings, I think, will just be the new normal of people's expectations. And you can see already a lot of operators and airlines are already doing that. And how that kind of normalizes over time, I think we will see. But I think certainly for the foreseeable future, and by that I mean 21, probably into 22, that I think it's just going to be the expectation of visitors to make a commitment is to have flexibility in those bookings.
Andrew, is there a focus on the type of holiday that you'll be promoting? For example, road trips versus hotel stay put stays?
Yeah, so when we get into Ignite, we've had an activity which is about Plan Your Adventure, which gives you a range of types of holidays you can have. Ignite will be very much that brand desirability and travel now. When we get into the demand aspect of that with partners, then that'll be packaged up into road trips. We know that over 70% of Australians love a road trip and expect that on a holiday. So that'll be planned into it. And that'll also be a significant part of their COVID, their perceptions of need to COVID, and since they'll travel in their mini bubble, so to speak. But effectively, yes, there will be a range of packages working with trade partners to realise the type of holiday that is relevant and motivating to that Australian audience.
Good thought. When the Tasman opens, will Tourism New Zealand also be putting some of its domestic marketing and encouraging Kiwis to stay home and not jump on a plane to Australia? So I guess it's do something new in New Zealand as opposed to do something new and go to Australia.
Yeah, no, it's a great and fair question, Chris. I think what I can say is we will definitely continue to promote strongly in New Zealand to New Zealanders about enjoying all the great things there are to do here. Whether we actively, we are debating this, but whether we actively divert funds into trying to stop people from going overseas, just as much as Australians have pent up desire to come here, New Zealanders will also have some pent up desire to go overseas again, right? So it's a question of going, how much do we spend on trying to swim against the tide in that regard? So what I can say is we'll continue to promote to New Zealanders to do new things in New Zealand. And the other thing is we are fishing in a bigger pond than they are fishing in, which is also good. Australia being 5 times our population, I think the opportunity for us is bigger than the opportunity is for them, if you like.
Great question here on, is there any negative rhetoric appearing in Australia which may deter Aussies immediately travelling to New Zealand when the bubble happens?
As in in press and consumer sentiment?
Yeah, I guess social, or is there anything you're picking up either openly or anecdotally?
No, I think the sentiment is positive. There's appreciation and respect of New Zealand's management of COVID and what that means. I think some of the states would probably view that as relatively more conservative than some they have done state-wise. But I think that what we have seen is more that idea that we're all in it together and we all got to rise together. I mean, we're all, I know New Zealand felt the pain of Melbourne's lockdown of 116 days or so. So I think it's ultimately, if it's open and the visibility of why it's open and that it's managed well and transparent, with full visibility of it, then I think that should pay into continue to pay into positive sentiment. We do want to and ensure, New Zealanders are providing that feel the embrace of the place, people in place when they arrive, and so we'll be working with on the idea of the Australian visitor and how they show up in New Zealand as well, respecting, what we would want from behaviour perspective of any visitor to New Zealand. Look after the people, look after the land, look after the community, road safety, all those sorts of things are all factors which would take into account when any Australian visitor is arriving in New Zealand.
Let's talk about cruise. Is there any efforts being placed on potentially getting an Australia, New Zealand international cruise bubble going? Lots of empty ships around the world. And if we're open to each other, does that mean the cruise lines will be actively back in the market?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think we would welcome cruise passengers back as much as any other visitors back into New Zealand. And I know that a lot of work's being done already with NZCA and Maritime and agencies to figure out what's safe cruising for Kiwis, to figure out what that looks like. So that has already resulted in some successful exemptions for heritage expeditions and Ponant Cruise Line who are coming in February. So that'll be a great kind of test and learn. Elsewhere, we work closely with CLIA, the Cruise Line Industry Association, and they are working on a framework for the safe return in Aussie and focused on three-pronged approach around prevention, mitigation, and response. So yes, certainly an important sector. We look forward to welcoming those visitors back, but some even more specific challenges, right, with the nature of cruising.
Great. And a question on research. What has been done to better understand any behavioural changes and impacts as a result of COVID? I guess that's broader than just the Australian market.
I can jump in. Yeah, we touched on it a little bit earlier, and we can share those insights and that research from the monitoring that we're doing. But things like health and safety are top of mind when people are considering visitation. Flexibility in booking, as I talked about, is an expectation now versus a luxury. Increasingly, and certainly what we're hearing through our trade partners, and many of you will be hearing that as well through your trade partners offshore, is how are you managing COVID track and trace, contactless payment, contactless check-in, managing groups. I think these are all the challenges that operators that you need to think about as well, is that people will be uncomfortable queuing in a long queue. So how do you manage that so that people can arrive kind of separated from each other and in their own bubble or cluster, if you like? So we're certainly seeing that research come through, and the expectation is that yes, this will have an impact on what people are looking for when they travel and the considerations that they make. And we continue to monitor that, and go to newzealand.com and look at our research and insights, and you can get all the latest data there.
Thanks, René. Ski campaign, is there any flexibility, Andrew, to move that campaign earlier if need be, depending on the timing of any bubble announcement, or I guess even moving it later?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ski campaign is This Is How We Winter, which was shot last year and was actually had to be paused with the introduction or with the arrival of COVID. So that's in the can and ready to go. And agency's been briefed on that, and we're working closely with the ski industry on the right timing for that. We want to coordinate and be very aligned to domestic and that supply and demand role, a connection of visitors from Australia and how that fits into that winter period. So yes, it is. Short answer, yes, it's flexible to be able to move sooner, earlier, or later, depending on the announcement.
Right. And a question here surmising on who our primary trade partners might be, and they've mentioned here Hello World Flight Centre, who were ones in the past. Are these still the same, or is that still commercial?
Yes, in the sense of their market reach and size. We are agnostic and balanced across our trade partner portfolio. So OTAs is an important one in providing the right price and flexibility. So Webjet and Expedia are other partners that we work with, working directly with airlines in the sense of realising their their booking cycle and been able to bring people to New Zealand. But what's really important is the trade marketing hub and being able to provide and reach every travel agent and trader, travel agent from mum and pop store down to individual travel agents and mobile MTAs, and providing the right support for them as well. So it's a universal offering. But as far as the bigger value and upweighted activity, it would be across the ones I mentioned earlier.
Andrew, how's the domestic landscape, travel agency landscape changed in Australia? Similar impact to over here, lots of closures?
Yeah, lots of retail closes, a significant challenge for travel agents. There has been an economic package from the Australian government that supported some of the travel and tourism, and they've had to continue to lobby their importance and the role that they play in economically and from a wellbeing perspective. So I would say similar journey that New Zealand industry's been across, and haven't the state borders have definitely affected their ability to return, both from an airline and a trade perspective as well, because there's been a start-stop scenario over the course of the last 6 to 9 months. So that's probably had a greater impact than maybe what domestic would have been in New Zealand. So yeah, significant challenges, and they're still in hibernation or survival and hibernation mode for sure.
Yeah. Indeed. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and we want to make sure we fit into the allotted time. You've got a busy schedule, I know. We've got one more question I've got time for, and then I'll come back to both René and Andrew for some closing remarks. But this last question is quite a good one, is the sentiment, of course, of New Zealanders, the public, for opening the borders again to, of course, initially Australians. But what research and what do we know about are they less than enthusiastic about opening up the borders, and what could the reactions be? And will we, as Tourism New Zealand, be doing something to promote to Kiwis the benefits of reopening the borders?
Yeah, look, it's certainly a very topical discussion, and one that we're also getting some more research and insights into, actually understanding what are New Zealanders' concerns around these things. And I think there's going to be a multi-pronged approach. It's not necessarily for Tourism New Zealand, but I expect also that there'll be from government angles talk about promoting the bubble once the announcement's been made between the two governments, right, in terms of promoting the benefits of that. I think we also will have a role in explaining to New Zealanders the benefits of tourism and the value that it brings, not only to the economy, but also from a people-to-people connection and those exchanges. So I think there is work to be done there, but it probably comes across a broader sector of industry, government, and Tourism New Zealand.
Excellent. So I might get Andrew, if you've got some final words that you'd like to pass on, and then we'll get René to end it up before we head off into the sunset for the day. Andrew.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to connect. We're a team that's hugely passionate and driven by the purpose of our role in Australia, and we're proud to represent New Zealand in Australia, and excited and forever optimistic around the timing of a Trans-Tasman travel zone. And so, we want to put our best foot forward to be able to realise that. Respecting and realising the challenges that has been faced with the loss of international tourism, and we've had time to think about and plan for going to market at the appropriate time. So we're primed and ready and eager, and we want to work with the whole of New Zealand industry to realise the value of that in a, as I said, sustainable visitor mix and value mix. So ultimately this is a call to get in touch, work with us on our plan and go to market, and be able to realise that value for individual regions, gateways, regions, and operators. So please get in touch with the team. Thanks for the time today, and we look forward to realising a fruitful and exciting 2021.
Excellent. Thanks once, René.
Great, thanks Wads, and thanks Paul for hosting. Look, thank you all for dialing in. Just to reiterate the point, Australia is vitally important. Getting our Australian cousins to come and visit us is going to make a significant difference to New Zealand and to the sector. So we're really looking forward to that. We're ready, and we will keep adjusting and flexing our plan to be ready to leverage it as soon as an announcement is made. And look, thank you again for all of your efforts in getting ready for that. Please stay connected with us, contact us, and we look forward to working with you as Australians start to return back to New Zealand. Kia ora, thank you.
Thanks, René. Thanks, Wads. I'm not sure if any of you can see the final slide, the end note on the screen, which is just a reminder. Sorry for the questions we didn't get through today. If you want any extra questions, if you want to contact us, there's coming up at the moment, I think you'll see it's my feedback at tnz.govt.nz. If we didn't get an opportunity to get to your question, we did get through most of them, I have to say, which was great. Then send it through and we'll pass it on to someone who can answer that. And certainly keep an eye on Tourism New Zealand .govt.nz, the Tourism New Zealand's corporate website. We'll have a video recording of this website up before the end of the week. We've got another website coming up next week, so keep your eye on that website too for future invites. Got some great insight research and a webinar coming up next week, and I'm sure we'll be doing plenty of messaging across to the industry over the coming months. It's going to be a really challenging but exciting time, so we're looking forward to working with you all as part of that. So on behalf of the TNZ team, thank you for giving up an hour of your lives today, and all the best for what's left of January, and let's have a great end towards summer as we move into border reopenings and our Aussie mates coming on over. Thank you everybody else. Kia ora.